Okay. Okay. Now we're set up, I think. The altruistic motivation. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Everybody can recite along with us. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. In Tibet, Dagla dangwar je pe dra no par je pe geg. Par pa dang tam she ken pe bar du jo par je pa tam she ki so je pe. Manam ka dam yam pe sem chen tam she de wa dang den. Dug now dong drel nor du la na me pa yang dag par zog pe zhang zhu bren po she to pa ja. The Action Bodhicitta Prayer. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Deshe du sang ma ge gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Ma she bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Du de ring ne song te ni ma sang ta sam gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. We take refuge in the kind root Lama and lineage Lamas. We take refuge in the deities and the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage Lamas. We take refuge in the deities and the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Transcend sawa danger pa je pe pao den la ma dam pa nam la kap su chi o. Yedam kil gorgi la sok nam la kap su chi o. Sangye chon den de nam la kap su chi o. Dam pe cho nam la kap su chi o. Pa pe ge du nam la kap su chi o. Pa wo ka dro cho kyong song me song yes she gi chang dang dem pa nam la kap su chi o. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Shangzhu Ningpo Chiki Bar Sangye Namla Kapsu Chi Chodang Shangshub Sampayi Soklang Deshin Kapsu Chi Jita Nongi De Shegi Shangshub Tugni Ke Padang Shangshub Sampe La Pala De Dag Rimshin E Patar De Shindro La Pendandu Shangshub Samni Kigishing De Shindu Ni La Pala Rimpa Shindu La Paji O. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye Chodang Soki Chonamla Shangshu Bardu Dagni Kapsuchi Dagi Jinsoki Pe Sonamgi Drola Penshir Sangye Jupasho. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pesem centam she de wadang de we gurdang dembar jurchi. Dug now dang do now gi gu dang drawar Georgie. Dug now me pe de wa dang mi drawar Georgie. Ne ring chak dang ni dang drawe dang namla ne pa Georgie. Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the opening prayers or anything that we talked about last week or something that we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about? So please just turn on your microphone or raise your hand and okay, very good. So I hope you all have some paper and a pencil or a pen nearby, and maybe you can take some notes. We're going to follow up on a few things that we talked about last week. Last week we gave a pretty broad overview of what we're doing as Buddhist practitioners, what we're trying to learn, and what it is that we're trying to present to beginners in the 101 classes that we have, and also for the more advanced students, people who have been with us for some time and have gone through this series of teachings over and over again. So every time that we do this, we always hear something, and we'll always think of something that was a little bit different than we had done before. So it's this is part of the practice, is to attend these kinds of teachings and renew those things that we have we've been introduced to from before. So last time we were talking about the 5 poisons. We were talking about that there are 84,000 emotions that are one of the prime causes of our suffering. We don't want to dwell on our suffering. We want to be able to understand our suffering so that we can relax, we can remove, or we can go above, we can transcend those sufferings. In order for us to do that, we need to understand where they come from, what the causes are. And then once we are able to recognize that, we apply the antidote to that suffering, to that poison, and then we're able to enjoy ourselves. We're able to relax, and we're able to find ourselves to be in that state of mind, that peace of mind that we're all looking for. So we need to understand the suffering, the causes of suffering. So the 84,000 emotions are the prime cause of suffering in human beings. And to understand 84,000 emotions would be a very daunting task. But we find that they get distilled down to 5 basic poisons. And the 5 basic poisons, does anybody remember what they are from last week that would like to tell us what they are? Just turn on your microphone.
Ignorance, hatred, desire, jealousy, and envy, greed, and pride.
Very good. Yes, perfect. So the first one, the most broad one, is ignorance. We don't know what we don't know. Ignorance can also be talked about in terms of delusion. The delusions that we tell ourselves, the way in which we hide. We create these prevarications about ourselves. We create these illusions for ourselves, these delusions of this web of lies that we kind of hide in. And we promote those lies very often to other people, that they may think that we're wonderful people and that we're balanced and we're happy and so on. But really, we don't know what it is that we don't know, and so we need to be able to understand that. So by nature of the ignorance, by nature of knowing that it's delusion, what do you think the antidote would that be? What do you think the antidote with ignorance would be? Anybody turn on your microphone and just speak right up.
Wisdom.
Wisdom. Okay. Anybody else have something? So if we don't know something, we can educate ourselves. We can look things up. If we don't understand something, we don't understand a concept or a word or something, we're ignorant of what it means, we start to do some research. So we say that the antidote to ignorance, or the antidote to delusion, is education, educating ourselves. And once we get an understanding of what it is that we're researching, what our education has brought us, it's very helpful to be able to repeat that to ourselves, to teach ourselves all the different myriad ways in which that all works together. And sometimes if somebody's asking you about it, you get to talk to them and you get to be a teacher yourself. You should always teach what you know. You shouldn't go so far out on a limb, but teaching and education go together. Because as we teach, we find out sometimes that we don't know everything that we'd like to, because a student may ask us something that wasn't quite clear, and then we fine tune the way in which we're presenting this. So we become better teachers through the relationship of a teacher and a student. So ignorance is the broadest thing that we of the emotions, causes of the emotions, and the education is the antidote to that. The second one is hatred. So what do you think the antidote to hatred would be?
Forgiveness.
Love.
I'm sorry, what was that, Gary?
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness?
Yes.
That's a very good part. Yes, that's a good part of overcoming hatred. So this is
Even when there's not really anything to forgive, if you have a feeling, whether it's justified or not, the one way to let go of it is forgiveness.
okay.
We're all fallible and we may be wrong. So
Okay. There's another word I'm looking for. Anybody else have an idea how we overcome what the antidote to hatred is?
Is it just love?
Yes, loving kindness, we would say. Loving kindness. That we are able to see through someone's hatred, their aggression, their anger, be able to see that they are confused and they have developed this anger that they're foisting upon us, or we're seeing it being foisted upon other people, something like that. And we're able to see through that anger, that anger or that hatred, and see that they have this twist in their own minds. And through our loving kindness, through our grace, through our forgiveness, like Gary said, through the forgiveness of being able to say, well, this person doesn't realize, they're ignorant of what it is that is causing this hatred within themselves. So this loving kindness is what we show them, is the way that we overcome any hatred within ourselves. If someone's coming to us with this anger and we meet it with equal anger, then we have a conflict and nothing's getting resolved. But if we're able to absorb that anger that's coming to us with loving kindness and say, well, this person is confused, they don't understand, and I'm going to absorb their anger and I'm going to try and help them to understand, show them some wisdom, show them some loving kindness, show them some forgiveness, so that maybe we can establish a relationship and we can neutralize that anger that they're bringing to us. So the antidote to hatred is loving kindness. The next of the 5 poisons is desire. And desire can also be expressed as lust, or as passion, or as attachment. This desires that we have for things. So what do you think the antidote to desire is? If you want something really bad and you become, so passionate about it, and you become very obsessive about it, and you can't think of anything else, think of maybe a job that you wanted, or think of maybe there was some clothing that you wanted, or there was some lover that you wanted, or something like that just completely consumed you for some period of time. not just a moment or two, but something where you can't think of anything else. You're totally consumed with this desire, this lust, this passion, this attachment. What do you think it is that you're able to do that is going to give you a neutralization of that desire?
Are you speaking of equanimity?
No,
Could it be minimalism?
no,
Emptiness?
no,
Impermanence?
no. It's more simple than that. It really is just getting looking at things objectively by
Is
being
it
able
contentment?
to know, to be able to withdraw, to be
So
able
to give something up, like you have to literally give something up. Like,
you have to give up your obsession. You have to give up your attachment. So the way we do that is by kind of stepping out of the situation. Like go stand in the corner for 10 minutes. Think about what it was that you were getting upset about. And then
I've had to do that a lot.
right, we all have.
It's been a
So
while.
the point is, it's like taking a time out. It's like getting an objective point of view on what your obsession is. What are you trying to do? And to be able to see that what you are attaching yourself to, what you are looking for, and so on, is something that is completely temporary. It is something that is made up in the mind as being real and something that you need to have to give yourself some kind of identity. If I've got that car, if I've got that lover, if I've got that house, if I've got that job, if I've got that bank account, whatever it is that we attach to and so on. But we find that all those things are just temporary things that actually can cause us more suffering. If I want that car and it's going to make me feel really good, but I go to the dealer and I say, well, I'd like to buy that car. And, we sit down and start talking about it. And I find out that it's more money than I thought it was going to be. And so I go out and I say, I really want that car. I'm going to get a second job so I can get the down payment or so that I can keep up the monthly payments for that car and so on. So that desire that I had for that car is costing me more than I thought. And even more than that, when you call your insurance person and say, hey, I just got this new car and I need it covered on my policy. He says, oh, well, that's fine. It's going to cost you more money because you got a brand new car now. So there's hidden costs. There's hidden things about those attachments that we don't realize. So by being able to take that objective time out and be able to look at all the different relationships that attachment is generating, we begin to get a sense, well, maybe I don't need that. Maybe I don't need all of that. Maybe I can be satisfied with something that is more practical. So by being able to take a time out, by being able to analyze, by being able to contemplate, to meditate, to be able to look at the situation rather than let this obsession be snowballing in our lives and taking control of ourselves. So that's the antidote to desire, is objectivity, is being able to look at what it is and analyze it and see how many combinations of things we get caught up in. So the next thing is jealousy. The next poison is jealousy. So what do you think, jealousy or envy? So jealousy being that we have a poor self-image of ourselves, a poor sense of well-being, that I don't deserve something, but I'm jealous of someone that has that. And it kind of gnaws away in the back of our mind. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I can't have that. Or I'm coveting that which I would really like to have. Oh, that that person has such a wonderful family relationship, and I would love to have a relationship like that. And I would like to have that, but it just kind of festers in my mind and just keeps my sense of poor well-being continuing to grow and deepen. So what do you think that the antidote to jealousy or to envy would be? And think about the fact that, think about the aspect that we're not good enough. If we're not good enough, we're thinking, oh, I don't deserve this. Oh, I'm in fear that if I do this, I'm going to fail.
Is it self-love?
Well, the antidote, self-love, the antidote would be developing fearlessness or unimpededness, to be able to engage in things that might be difficult for us, but by overcoming that fear, by overcoming that sense of inability of accomplishment, we ultimately find out that we can accomplish anything and everything that we want to accomplish. So it's that fearlessness, developing the all-accomplishing sense that we can do what we can attain, whatever it is that we need to attain. Now, the interesting thing about doing something like that, let's say that there's someone that we really admire, somebody that we really care for, someone that we really like to have a relationship with, a lover, something like that, and we reach out and we make some kind of a relationship, we start developing it, but as we go along, we find out that there's a lot of complication with this relationship. And there's more to this relationship than I'm willing to be able to engage with. It's not a practical relationship for me. Many people go to school and they go to college, university, and they take a major and whatever that major might be, and they get halfway through it and they realize, oh, this isn't for me. This isn't something I'm really interested in. Or they graduate and they get the degree, and then they go out and start working, with that degree that they have, and they find out, wow, I just don't enjoy this kind of work that I got this degree in. So in each of those cases, the question becomes, what do we do? Do we continue living a lie that we've told ourselves, a commitment that we've made for ourselves to go get this person as our spouse, to go get this job, to go get this degree in school, although I don't like it? Or do we say, you know what, I made a mistake. Let me stop what I'm doing, let me back up, and then let me move, and maybe there was another direction that I was contemplating going in that I didn't do, and maybe that's the one that's going to make me happy. So that takes a lot of fearlessness, a lot of ability to be able to say, I've got confidence in myself that I can do that I can say I made a mistake. So sometimes we'll succeed in that and we'll be happy in that. We'll overcome our jealousy that way. Sometimes the jealousy is a blind jealousy, and we wind up living a lie, compounding a lie that we carry on through the rest of our lives, staying in a marriage that we don't like, living, having a job we don't like, getting a degree in school that we don't like, things like that. So the point now is that what we are jealous of, the jealousy, the poison of jealousy, the poison of envy, is overcome through fearlessness, through unimpededness, through being able to go through anything that we need to go through to be able to find our satisfaction, to find our success, even if we have to realize that we made a mistake in wanting that and change, back up, and go to another choice. So now the last of the 5 poisons is greed. Greed, and greed becomes pride. Greed, oh, I've got this job. I've got this responsibility. I know how to do these things. The people in the company really respect me because I can do these things. And I become prideful for this. And I say, and I can walk down the halls in the building and so on and think I'm the only person that can do all these things. And they all need me to be able to do all this. And I don't want to share this. I become greedy with this. I don't want to share it because I don't want to lose that pride. So I'm not going to train anybody. And if the boss comes to me and says, "Hey, I need you to train so and so over here because they're going to come into your job description and they need to learn some of the finer points in the way that you apply this in our business and so on." And am I going to say, "Oh, sure, I want to do that"? You know, after that, you're going to get rid of me. You're going to say, "Oh, I don't have to pay him anymore. I can pay this new guy who makes a whole lot less and he can do his job because he just learned how to do it." So I become greedy with the things that I know, the things that I do. Maybe it's money in the bank. Maybe I've earned all this money and now I don't want to share it. I don't want to share it with other people, you know, people who are less fortunate than myself. Maybe it's people that live in another country or people that are, you know, facing disasters and so on that could have some help or something like that. So it could be knowledge, it could be resources, it could be money, it could be many different things that I become greedy with and that I become prideful about and so on. So what do you think is the antidote to that greediness, to that pridefulness?
Generosity.
Exactly. Generosity. By sharing, by realizing that whatever it took for me to be able to earn this money, to earn this respect, to have this job, I haven't, if I share it, I'm not losing my ability to continue to bring more in. I'm not losing that ability. And plus I'm sharing because of my altruistic motivation. I'm sharing the good fortune that I've been able to enjoy. I'm sharing it with other people. And maybe one of the things that it does, it now frees me up so that I can do something else, maybe within the company, do something else as a family person, in relationships. I can do something else because the responsibilities that I had was binding me up. Now I can do something different that expands my abilities even more. It makes me more confident in being able to be who I am, what I am, and so on like that. So the generosity has many, many ways in which that can happen with other beings. And we look for those ways to be generous with other beings and to be compassionate with them, those beings who are suffering, who don't have these things, who need these things, whether it's money or whether it's some responsibility or it's some kind of charity or something like that. We have compassion for them. And compassion becomes an antidote to the to the pridefulness. Pridefulness, oh, I don't need this. So we'll see how this manifests later on, because these 5 poisons manifest themselves in what we call the 6 human realms. Human beings have 6 ways in which they operate. We call it the 6 psychophysical dramas of being a human being. So we'll talk about that another time. But right now, we need to establish these building blocks of the 5 poisons in the words that we used and the 5 antidotes in the words that we used. So by using the words that we use, you'll find that these are words that are used in so many of the books, so many of the scriptures, so many of the teachings, and so on. So it's important to be able to learn these things in the way in which they're being presented to us. And then we meditate on them, or we contemplate them, and we begin to see the different myriad ways in which they connect with each other and the other words that go along with that. But these words are very succinct and to the point and powerful. So it's important to be able to learn them in the same way. We're all speaking the same vocabulary. We're all using the same references and so on. So this is a fundamental point of Buddhism 101, is establishing this vocabulary. Does anybody have any questions about this? Any thoughts about this that you want to bring up? This is a good time to do that.
What does somebody do if they're being altruistic, but like that the intention behind trying to be altruistic is like for like vain reasons, I guess. You know, like
Pridefulness.
yeah.
Like
Okay.
pridefulness, yes. Well, you see, that's how these connect together, and that's how 5 poisons then become 84,000 emotions, where they connect to each other. How do we examine that? Through our practices, through our contemplation, through the meditation, through the recitation of these prayers and these practices that we do, that gives us the ability to be able to gain that objectivity, to be able to see that, and to be honest with ourselves. So it's very simple. It may be hard to do because we hold on because of our ego. Our ego, that's what becomes prideful. So the ego doesn't want to give up. The ego likes its position. The ego will attach to anything. Unfortunately, the ego will attach to the pridefulness of being a really good person and greedy and having all these things, having the money and having the power. But the ego will also attach to our poor sense of well-being, that I'm not good enough. You know people, or maybe you've gone through this yourself, or you know people that are just miserable kind of people who just feels so inadequate, and they just go through their lives feeling inadequate all the time. And it's hard for them to break that cycle, and the ego's holding on to that for them. So we need to recognize that the ego is this thing that human beings have that we need to be able to control. We can't let it control us. So the ego, though, is insidious in the way that it creeps in so many different ways. So we have to, again, rely on the system to be able to give ourselves the perspective to be able to analyze what's going on. Does that make sense, Amy?
Yeah, thank you.
Many times when we sit down, like, our goal is for everybody to find a time during the day when they can sit down and do some kind of a practice, some kind of a meditation, some kind of a contemplation, a quiet time. And there's a prescribed way to go through the stages of that practice. So for instance, let's say it's a 30-minute practice. So the first 10 minutes or so you're spending reciting these opening prayers. And then the next 20, 30 minutes, the next 10 minutes or so, you're contemplating something that has been on your mind. Something comes into your mind, or maybe it's a book, maybe it's a prayer that you want to learn, something that you're trying to memorize. But then there's these nagging things that keep on coming into your mind, and you have to deal with them. Maybe it's a phone call you got to make, or maybe it was an argument that you had yesterday or something. So we need to be able to deal with those. So these are the tools in which we're dealing with those emotions, with those thoughts that are coming up when we sit down to do our practice, when we sit down to do our study. One of the things that we are learning to do is to endure our life as a human being. If somebody thinks that everything that they do, everything that they're involved in, is just a complete suffering, a complete misery of being alive, there are lots of people like that. Some people think everything is very euphoric and they're on top of everything and everything, life is just a bowl of cherries and they're just enjoying each cherry one at a time and having a good time and so on. But I think our lives are a combination of those things. We see that we are in the midst of all this changing stuff, and that which becomes easy for us at some point maybe becomes difficult for us because it ages, it doesn't work like it used to, and things like that. And some things that we really had to work for ultimately become very easy for us, but then they become difficult later on. So we're constantly going through this change. And we need to endure this change. And this is part of what we call this ocean of suffering. Now, this isn't to become melodramatic or anything like that, but we are in this midst of all this stuff that we really don't understand. We talk about all this stuff as being phenomenal. We don't know how it got here. We don't know how we got here. You know, it's like some kind of a miracle of things that happen and so on. And we don't know the actual way that all these things happen. But we don't need to know all that. And people suffer, a lot of people suffer because they think they can know. And they want to know. And they spend their lives chasing after all these things. You know, so I'm not going to try and put down the scientific community or the religious community or anybody or the philosophic community, any of these people who focus their entire lives on trying to understand the human condition and so on. It's important to be able to do that, but it's also important to be able to relax and to be able to say, you know what, there are just some things I just don't know. And there's some things that other people don't know either, although they're chasing these things. So we talk about this as this ocean of suffering, of going through all these vicissitudes, all these changes in life and so on. So this ocean of suffering is like got all these things in it, all these natural things, all these organic things, all these inorganic things, and so on. And it's like in this great big ocean that's more huge than all the oceans on this planet, more than you can ever imagine, this ocean of suffering. And all this stuff is just kind of settling down, all this confusion, all these emotions, all these poisons are all just kind of settling down. And when they settle down, they get into the bottom of this ocean. And it's like this muck, it's like this mire, like this filth that is down to this organic matter and so on. So it's kind of like, you know, going into a pond that has very slow moving water, and you walk in there with no shoes on and your feet just oozes through your toes, and you reach down, you pick it up, and there's this black ooze, and you just wouldn't want to rub it all over yourself or anything like that. You just know that this is just filthy and disgusting and so on. So it's from that. That is an analogy of what it is to be a sentient being, what it is to be a human being, to realize that we come from all that stuff that's settling down. Our life is like that ocean of suffering, that ocean of change. But what happens is there are some good things that are in the stuff there that settle down into that ooze. And those good things that settle down are like seeds. They're seeds of a plant. And that plant, at the right conditions, when the sunlight is right, when the warmth is right, when the nutrients are right, when the temperature is right, all the conditions around that seed that's now in that ooze are right, all of a sudden the seed pops open and it begins to sprout. There comes a sprout that comes out of that with a long stem. And this long stem goes all the way through the water, all the way to the top of the water, through the surface of the water, out into the atmosphere, and opens up and becomes a flower. So this flower is called a lotus flower. This is a lotus. There might be other flowers that do similar things, but in this Eastern tradition, they talk about this lotus flower over and over again because it becomes a metaphor for the human experience. That out of this muck and mire, out of all this defilement, out of all this confused state, comes this seed that sprouts and comes up into the upper atmosphere and opens up and becomes this beautiful stainless lotus flower. Different colors, white, pink, blue, many different colors and so on. And it's pure. But its purity came from that defilement. And that's a metaphor for who we are as human beings, that we come from all this confusion. We come from all this misunderstanding. We come from all this emotion. But if we put ourselves in the right situation, if we put ourselves in the right objectivity, we can see the seeds within ourselves sprouting and coming through all this confusion and coming out into this pure atmosphere, as we would call it. So the name for this ocean of suffering in Sanskrit is called Samsara. 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 That's the name of this ocean of suffering. And you can open up so many different books and read about that. And they talk about it in other traditions. You know, this is not something that is unique to Buddhism. In Christianity, for instance, they talk about this. This is called the Sophia. They call this ocean of suffering the Sophia. They have a slightly different way of explaining it, but it's this place of change, this place of confusion. So this samsara, this ocean of suffering then, and that flower that comes through and opens up into the upper atmosphere, that is called nirvana. And surely you've heard of nirvana. So this nirvana is a temporary bliss, is a temporary release from that ocean of suffering. And what we try to do is to maintain our being the embodiment of that lotus flower that has blossomed in that nirvana, to remain in that nirvana. As human beings, we're going through many ups and downs. Sometimes we fall back into the ocean of suffering. Sometimes it's just very easy to do that. Sometimes it's just like a hand falling in. Sometimes we get completely submerged. We lose our complete understanding of what's going on, and we're just plunged back into this ocean of suffering. But sometimes it's just a hand that falls in or a leg that falls in. We realize that we made a mistake, we can correct ourselves, and we can get ourselves back to nirvana. So nirvana is this temporary, blissful experience of peace, peace of mind, quietude, happiness, all these different words that we can use to describe this blissful state, but it's temporary. And we have to understand from the very beginning that samsara and nirvana are like two sides of the same hand. So one side being samsara, the other side being nirvana. And it stays with us the whole time that we're human beings. It's always there. This is part of this phenomenal nature that we're trying to understand, but we're trying to be able to endure. We're trying to realize this is all part of the human condition. So by recognizing the causes of our sufferings, by recognizing the antidotes that we can apply to these poisons, we achieve a balance, an equanimity, a balance that keeps us in that nirvanic state, in that nirvana. And we want to be able to do that. We want to be able to do that through our entire lives. We want to be able to radiate that for the benefit of other beings. So this is what we call bodhicitta. You know, the bodhicitta we talked about last week, the loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. This is the heart mind of all the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, all the enlightened beings. But not just the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, just not in Buddhism, but also in Christianity and Judaism and Taoism and Muslim and whatever tradition you can think of. They talk about this in different terms, but they're all talking about this in as the essence of what their philosophy is, what the essence of their system is, their religion, whatever they might call it, that bodhicitta. So again, I said that in Buddhism, it's very well articulated. So many books have been written about this. So many teachers are teaching about this and sharing this vocabulary that we use. So this samsara and this nirvana is something that is going through our entire lives. And this is indicative of our dualistic nature. That we have this dualistic nature. Now, the great scientists today are looking for a singularity. Everybody's trying to find the truth. Where is the truth? I'm looking for the truth. And that's a good thing to do. It's not a bad thing to do at all. But we need to do it with joy. We need to do it with equanimity. We need to do it with egolessness, with selflessness, not being selfish about it, sharing what we know, sharing what we have understood, and being able to share that joy and so on with other beings, all beings. This is what we're learning to do. This is what we're trying. This is the altruistic motivation. This is the action bodhicitta. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with my body, my speech, and my mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with my body, my speech, and my mind. From now until tomorrow, tomorrow never comes. From now until tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with my body, speech, and mind. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to become this holy person who is undisturbed by all these dualistic confusions that we create for ourselves. These things are in our culture. They're in our society, and we buy into them. We're not born with these things. We're born with just pure goodness. But we allow ourselves to get corrupted. You know, we're helpless. As a 1-year-old child, as a 6-month-old child, as a 2-year-old child, we're basically helpless. And whatever our parents are teaching us, whatever our families are teaching us, whatever schools we go to are teaching us, and we're being imprinted with all these different confusions and so on that other people are bringing into our lives. And unless we have some kind of a strong propensity within ourselves that we bring into this life, from whence we come, from where from that spiritual dynamic that happens when the sperm and the egg come together, and that spirit enters that sperm and egg and then grows to become who we are. So unless we have that strong spiritual sense, that sense of knowledge, that experience of karma, good karma, bad karma, then we begin to interact with those conditions that are being presented to us. And then we create our lives. We become the architect of our lives and the engineer who has to constantly be tweaking the changes in our lives and so on to deal with that. So this is all the endurance of being in samsara and nirvana. Being in samsara and nirvana, and being able to evaluate this. Now, hearing this, maybe some of you for the first time, maybe some of you have heard this many times and read this and thought about this and so on. It can be mind-boggling sometimes. Sometimes we get very attached to the things that we believe, that we think we know, and we don't want to give up any understanding because we're fearful, that we're going to lose something, but by creating a practice for ourselves, creating that space and time where we can sit and we can go through this process of this system and allow these thoughts to generate within ourselves and to be able to examine them, then changes begin to happen for the positive. We be able to see how we become more virtuous, more good, more forgiving, more educated. The benefits of the 5 antidotes: education, generous. We become more fearless. We become more contemplative, and we have more loving kindness. We are bodhicitta, the holy enlightened mind. We recognize that that's our true nature. That's who we are. When the Buddha said we're all Buddha, that's what he said. We've all got that nature. We've all got that, but it's blocked up. It's covered up with the emotions. It's covered up with our misconceptions, with our habitual tendencies. So we're learning these different aspects of what that is so that we can rid ourselves of those, so that we can bring those things onto the path and develop that wisdom, cultivate that wisdom. The wisdom is knowing both sides, is knowing the dualism. The wisdom is not just being completely one-sided and being completely pure wise. Being wise means you know both sides. You know all the myriad ways in which this operates. And then you become a better navigator through all that. And you become a better teacher for other beings' benefits. Anybody got any questions or comments? You want to take a short break, stand up and get a drink of water or something? You have something you want to say? Just turn on your mic or raise your hand.
Lance, this is Zara. I was going to ask a question about something you had mentioned about 30 minutes ago regarding like ego and pride, where people get stuck in such a way where everything is like negative. One way I see this is where people constantly self-deprecate, like, and deflect anything positive that anyone would say. I don't know if you've seen this, where they have an excuse and belittle themselves, take away, like, actually you did do something great, and accept that you just did, instead of deflecting and saying something negative. Is that also an example of that, what you were describing?
Yeah, I think so. Sure. I'm guilty of that. I've done that myself.
Yeah.
You think you're being humble, or you're showing some humility or something like that, but or maybe you're setting yourself up, waiting for somebody to say, "Oh no, you're much better than that." When you have that deprecating humor or something. But some people, like you just point out, really believe that they're inadequate.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I was wondering, like, when I come across that now, I look at it differently than I would have 5 years ago. Like when questioning like why people exist in that state where they can't accept something positive that someone has said without it just being like, well, so I think about that in relation to how to be a better human to them, right? Like, do I just remain silent? Do I reinforce that and say, oh, no, 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 like, feeding into the ego, right? No, no, you really are that great. Or say like, hey, why is it difficult for you to accept that? I think about that in practice, like what that would mean for me to be more loving, and what love and kindness would look like in that. Oftentimes find that in the type of work I do where people won't accept their positive skills and such, what they're born with.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you because your work is steeped in that. So how do you do that? I guess you have the benefit of people coming to you for help. So it's not like you're walking down the street and you meet somebody and you start talking to them and tell them, that they're not as bad as they think they are. I mean, there's people that are coming to you for some help. So,
Well, one thing I have started doing is I'll start just asking directly, why is this uncomfortable for you to receive a genuine compliment? Like, so calling it out versus
yeah,
pacifying them, saying, what's uncomfortable about receiving a genuine, authentic compliment?
yeah, I think that's that. Yeah, I think that's a great answer to that. Absolutely.
Can
Yeah.
I sort of chime in on that just a little bit?
Sure,
I don't know
please.
if this is to do with what you're getting across, Zahra, but I think just relating to the culture that I grew up in, a lot of it was in the line of humility. So if somebody were to give us a compliment, or if somebody were to, offer us something that, you know, logically we deserve, like a reward or a compliment or anything of that sort, we were just through my culture, we were just always taught to immediately reject. Like, that's always going to be our first line of defense, is to reject out of humility. I don't know if that's something that is in line of what you're speaking, or more so that you've noticed that they're actually psychologically self-deprecating themselves. But I think it might be helpful to know that it's actually part of some people's culture to immediately just kind of shut down anything like that, to prevent pridefulness from cultivating itself.
Are you Iranian or Persian?
Syrian.
Oh, okay. We have a word for what you just described in the Persian culture. Like, it's so pervasive that it's like you have to kind of what you said, it's expected you engage in that self-deprecation and
Right.
no, I can't accept that. Like, it's almost so
Yeah.
it's fake though. It's like a false cultural behavior pattern. It's not sincere. It's just
Right.
just what's modeled. So I do, because I think about that, because I live in that existence with my father, and I question that. But actually, behind the scenes, like, that's really fake what just happened. Like, when we closed the door, I'm like, that wasn't real. Why why did you just do that? And that's uncomfortable when you call people out on the cultural behaviors that are just passed down, and ask, why are you doing that? Because it's
Yeah.
so insincere. It's not actually serving what it was intended to, which is true humility. You just did it just because. At least that's my direct experience with my cultural perspective. But I appreciate you saying that, because that is very true. You're exactly right about the origins of it and the intention of it. Probably originally, it's so degraded at this point. Like the genuine intention of it. So thank you for that.
Right.
Yeah, thank you both. And I've seen that. In Western cultures that have come or Eastern cultures that have come to the West, and they have that humility about them. But sometimes it becomes, like you just said, it becomes very. You see right through it. It seems very false. They're doing it for a, to appear humble, but it seems very fake. I've noticed that too. I mean, on the other side, Western people would never do something like, well, I shouldn't say would never, but a lot, oh, I can do that, that's no problem, and they go out on a limb and try and figure out how to get keep themselves from sawing themselves off the limb, you know. So that's the other side of that. They're trying to be egoless, while in the West, we're trying to be ego strong. So good stuff to think about. You know, these are things to contemplate about. These are things to take notes about and examine. That's what we're trying to do. It doesn't mean we're always going to get a resolute answer right away, but it starts a conversation within yourself. You know, we're not, you know, this kind of study and practice, the spiritual practice, is a lifestyle. It doesn't necessarily come to full realization. It doesn't come to full perfection in this lifetime. And maybe that's one of the things that we have to, as Westerners, you know, to examine and to be able to say, hey, you know, maybe there is this continuity of life that we don't recognize, we don't remember, but yet there is something, like I said before, when that sperm and that egg come together, and there is this spiritual force that is coming and is uniting with that egg and that sperm and becomes a being. You know, where is that coming from? What is it that is coming in there? What is that energy? What is that? You know, and is there this continuum of that? When we die, what do we really? Our body dies. When our body dies, our mind dies, our brain dies, and all our memory dies. All that stuff just goes. But there's something within our heart center that is our love center, and we say, well, you know, that's indestructible, and that continues, and that's what remanifests itself in another being in another time.
Hey, Feza and Zara, in like the Syrian or in and then Persian culture and stuff, is there like a lot of like self-loathing in the same way that there is in like American culture? I don't. That's obviously what I'm most familiar with is American culture and maybe other like European cultures. Is that present a lot in the same way?
Not from my firsthand experience, at least in my household. Because there's such a strong anchor with like the religion, like being so integral as part of that culture. Like that is not encouraged, right? Like it's like going back to your faith in God. And so self-loathing would be a behavior that would not be culturally modeled, I think, at least outwardly, where we would go back to prayer and to God and to seeking solace in that mechanism. But it's interesting that you just pointed that out. I hadn't thought of it, the comparison across cultures.
And I wasn't implying that was what was going on with your dad. I was just thinking about it too, especially as like with Buddhism coming to the West and our culture and stuff. I think I'm sure definitely not unique, but like there's this like self-loathing kind of thing. This like chronic not being good enough feeling that, you know, I think pervades a lot of people. I know I've definitely experienced, but
Do you mean when you merge the American culture with Buddhist culture is when that arises?
No. I just mean just in general, like in our culture, you know, obviously it's a huge overgeneralization, but where there's a lot of this kind of self-aggrandizing, but also this like self-loathing. And so, you know, I work as a therapist and everything too. And it's like, you know, when people come in, they're all, you know, they don't present that to the world, but there's just this like deep like self-loathing and shame and everything, which I'm sure is universal to some extent, but it seems like in our culture, maybe that's just like the volume on that is turned up a lot for whatever reason. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll second Zara. That was really well said. What she just said, but yeah, I mean, the only self-loathing, like where mine stemmed from, was a lot of just it didn't stem from anything that was projected from a cultural or even religious perspective per se, but more just just individually the way that my parents raised me with like, you
Yeah.
know, a lot of parents make mistakes with like guilting and shaming, but definitely not from culture.
Do you think that that races, the different races on this planet, you know, can have that, and the caste systems, you know, and you know, in certain parts of the world, at certain times, and so on, that there were those who, you know, had great pride, but there were those who might have been self-loathing and so on, and saw themselves as inferior, and feeds into their subculture and so on like that. That there are these dynamics like that.
I'm sure, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, this has been interesting. Anybody else have anything else you want to add, or bring up a different point of view, a different topic on this?
Well, Lance, I was gonna like tie the loop back to like it's within our karma, right? If we're born into some, like we're born into United States or born into like other continents. I'm synthesizing previous teachings from you and thinking like it's part of our individual karma, right? Our history and our energy, like being born into certain situations that allow for these direct experiences, whether we're from the West or East. But that's more of me thinking at a maybe a broader level of application.
Yeah.
No, but you're right, and how we deal with that, you know, because sometimes, you know, we may be born into what we might term a lower strata of society, but then what we're bringing with that from our past life is something that inspires many people to be able to rise above, you know, that built-in self-defeatism, or lack of self-value or something like that. You know, so there's heroes that can be experienced at those levels too. And then likewise, there can be people that bring you down. You know, people that are trying to enslave you in one way or another. You know.
Yeah, I had some questions about like karma and stuff too, but I don't want to derail things too much. I don't know, maybe that's something we'll touch on more in depth. That'd be a more appropriate time to bring it up. But
Yes, thank you. We will, and we will. And what I did want to get to was another point. Gavin, did you want to say something before we go on?
I've just been contemplating while listening to everyone's questions and answers whether or not the sun has any effect, like on astrology and the radiation from the sun that's different at different months of the years, which equates to personality differentiation, and then gets turned into astrology. Whether or not that plays into the self-loathing. I understand culture and also East and West, but is there something even more deep? Like when we're in a zygote and we're developing in the fetus, as we're receiving the radiation from the sun at different times of the year and develop it, and then we come into being born. Like a Leo, for example, just in that constellation, they seem to not exert much self-loathing. Um, just from a fresh mind. You add alcoholism or something like culture, then it's different. So I was just thinking more about the solar radiation being received while we're in the ova and how that affects our consciousness to become grouped into these different personality. They called astrology, or there's, I don't know, it's interesting how there's 12 of those, and it's governed by the radiation of the sun at each interval of the year as it hits the womb and goes through the zygote.
Well, I think it's an interesting conversation, but not something we could finish tonight. And you know,
True.
there's lots of different systems that are, you know, we can invoke, you know, to talk about things like that. And so I think that's a conversation we can have along with the karma conversation. You know, we can talk about that, how, because that's the next part of this conversation, is how this manifests in the six realms of being a human being. So
Okay.
what Matthew just said and what you're introducing right now are both interesting dynamics of being able to explain that, in one way or another. So we'll have more time to talk about that next week and the weeks following that. So if we can postpone
Thank
that
you.
part of the conversation.
Yes.
What I would like to do, I would like to change gears now to get back into this meditative part of things. Here we've been talking about a philosophical kind of academic, principles, vocabulary, and so on. And then now I want to shift this into the spiritual aspect of, well, how do I relate to this? How do I bring this in? And so last week we talked about the Bodhisattva, the holy enlightened being. Bodhisattva in particular was Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. So I want to continue this and go a little bit deeper with that to maybe help bring this together. And Matthew last time, made a point that, some of this cultural stuff is really hard for us to be able to understand or to agree to or whatever. But the way in which we do get into it is through the education and trying to understand what's trying to be conveyed here and be able to process that within ourselves. And maybe there's a better way that can be expressed, but we have to have a starting point. So as our starting point, we'll use these references that we have here in the Buddhism culture and see how it's going to change. And let me make this one important point as briefly, very quick. And that is, Buddhism started in India. And it had this whole culture around it and so on, and went through centuries of change and moved around the East, over the years and so on. And then about 1,000 years after Buddha lived in India, then the Buddhism started moving up into Tibet. And Tibet had this very shamanistic culture there. And it had its own iconography, had its own, deities and so on, and its own ways of expressing things. And it was very shamanistic, very devout. And so as the Indian Buddhism came in, what happened was that there was some friction because the native Tibetans didn't want to have this Indian philosophy coming in, and the Indian philosophy thought it's going to come in and it's going to enlighten these people that are in Tibet and so on. So they called upon this great master to come and be able to diffuse this conflict, and this master was able to morph these two things together, this native shamanistic tradition that was in Tibet, together with this Indian seeming pristine Buddhism together, and created what we call Tibetan Buddhism today. And and that has gone on for 1,500 years or so. So now we're seeing something similar happening. The East is coming to the West in a way that's never happened before. In the past 60 years or so, there has been this great dynamic interchange of cultures that are coming together. So it begs the point where there'll be a morphing of this. And if we could come back in 500 years from now or 1,000 years, what would it look like? Would these philosophies have come together to create some new version of this? Or would they have conflicted and gone to their polar sides and rested in that? So we're in the midst of that. We're maybe not in the midst exactly, but we're in the beginning stages of that. And to be able to open ourselves up to that morphing, to that dynamic change that has happened before. So just keep that in our mind somewhere. So with that in mind, now I want to go back to that practice that we were doing last time, and this one of Manjushri. And you remember Manjushri, golden body, pure, indestructible, has the wisdom sword, cuts through all ignorance, cuts through all dualism, cuts through all confusion. And it is the power of that is comes from this purity, this lotus flower, which has this text, this scripture that's resting on it, and through this knowledge is able, through the spiritual connection, through the heart, is able to manifest as this cutting through, this wisdom of cutting through of confusion and so on. So that's what we were talking about last time. And now I want to come to understand the embodiment of this within ourselves, because this is a metaphor for ourselves, and being able to understand this. Excuse me, I'm just getting rid of this block here. So this praise. So we're recognizing that this image of Manjushri is within ourselves. We're trying to revision ourselves, review ourselves in this position. Maybe not so literally with the type of garments that we're wearing, but with the purity of the gold, with the richness of the gold, with the wisdom that's coming in through our left hand on this pure lotus flower, this wisdom that's coming from the text. And we're processing it through our heart center, through our spiritual center. And then it's going out through the right hand, through this sword that cuts through confusion, that cuts through ignorance, that cuts through the 5 poisons and so on, of the dualistic nature. So we become ultimately that being who is doing that. We don't have to dress like that. We don't have to look exactly like that, but we have the embodiment of those virtues, of those qualities. So here in this praise, we are singing the praise, we are reciting the praise of what it means to be that embodiment. And this may help us to cut through our obstacle of not allowing ourselves to become transpersonal, to be able to see that we can see ourselves in different ways. So you can follow me with this. You can recite this as I recite this. And this is, both of these texts are in the WhatsApp. So if you want to download them and print them, you can do that. If you want me to send you printed copies, I can do that. Okay, so we start here. It says, his wisdom is brilliant like the sun, free of the clouds of the 2 veils, perceives the various types of knowledge in their true nature. For this reason, he holds the wisdom text at his heart. So this is the dualistic, this is the dualism, the 2 veils, the 2 confusions, the types of knowledge, to be able to recognize that, to be able to see that there is this dynamic of dualism that is going on. And for this reason, he holds this wisdom text at his heart. So here he's trying to overcome this and seeing that there is this scripture, there is this system that can help. So for this, so he has compassion for all beings who suffer from the darkness of ignorance in the prison of samsara, as a father for an only son. So here this being, we are taking this in, and with our compassion to help ourselves and to help other beings. Maybe our motivation is stronger to help other beings. Maybe our children, for a father to help his only son. We're willing to be so altruistic that we will give up our own sense of well-being for the sense of well-being for our children, for the sense of being for others. But by doing that, it helps us. That if we were reticent and not wanting to to do for ourselves. We were trying to practice selflessness and didn't want to do ourselves first. We did others, but through that we recognized the value for doing it for ourselves. So we're trying to help compassion. We're trying to have compassion for beings who suffer from the darkness of ignorance in the prison of samsara. So samsara we talked about earlier as the ocean of suffering. As a father for an only son. Like a thunderclap, he awakens those who are sleeping in ignorance and loosens the chain of karma through the 60 branches of harmonious speech. So like a thunderclap, as sudden as a thunderclap, how spontaneous a thunderclap is, he's able to awaken those sleeping in ignorance, those beings who are unaware, who are delusional, who are confused, who are bound up in the chain of karma. He's able to free them. He's able to awaken them through the 60 branches of harmonious speech. So this harmonious speech can take many different ways of explaining it. It can be explained that all the different languages of the world have taken these texts and the teachings of the Buddha and the masters that came after the Buddha, and has been able to translate them for all these different beings of all these different cultures and these 60 branches of harmonious speech. And the speech is harmonious. It is not conflicting. It is showing the way to harmony, that the success of this comes from all this coming together, not from it being pulled apart. It's a very important part that we're looking for the harmony of this. And the way in which we do this is with a pleasant voice, that whatever language we are using is a voice that is pleasant and we're happy to hear and is settling to us and not becomes harmful or harsh to us. It is harmonious and brings our mind together with our body and our speech. Our body, speech, and mind are coming together. And the cultures are all coming together in this harmonious speech. The speech here is the intellectualization of this spirituality. The speech is the agent of the intellect. So, and if the intellect is being conditioned or is being processed through the purity of the spirituality, this is what we're trying to accomplish. This is what we're trying to do. So then it says, he wields the wisdom sword to cut the seedling of suffering and to dispel the darkness of confusion. So this is a very poetic way of saying the same thing we said before, the wisdom sword to cut through the suffering, to dispel the darkness of confusion, that all this myriad dualisms and so on are cut through and laid bare so that we can see the essence of what is in both of those dualistic natures. So in the Bodhisattva form, the holy enlightened form, he is pure from beginningless time. This is Manjushri. He is pure and beginningless time. When we start out as human beings, when we are born pure. We are born ignorant, but we are born virtuous. We are born with goodness. We are born pure. And from beginningless time, this carries on because we find that this time is an invention of human beings. This location is an invention of human beings. But this spirituality has no time, has no place. It is omnipresent. In this one place, you are everywhere at every time. So this Bodhisattva form. So we are trying to become this Bodhisattva form. We are trying to recognize ourselves in this holy enlightened being. Fully accomplished in the 10 levels and perfect in the body of knowledge. So the 10 levels are the 10 levels of purification that the Bodhisattva goes through through the path of becoming a Bodhisattva, of becoming a Buddha. So we'll go into the bhumis later on. Those are called the bhumi levels. So we'll talk about that later on. But each one is a purification level of confusion and emotions and selfish thought and self-aggrandizement and habitual tendencies and so on. So we have to call those out, identify those, and apply the antidotes to those to purify ourselves and perfect in the body of all knowledge. That our body, that we embody that knowledge, that we become the repositor of all of that. And then it says, I supplicate you, Manjushri, adorned by the 112 signs of a Buddha, to dispel the darkness of my ignorance. So this is a way of saying that I supplicate you, Manjushri, that is within me, that is a holy being within myself. And there are these 112 signs that we can look at to identify ourselves as being this Bodhisattva, to become Buddha, to dispel the darkness of my ignorance in order that I can help other beings. So that becomes a very powerful prayer, a praise to ourselves, should become an inspiration to ourselves, to look at ourselves in this way, to see ourselves in this way. So now we will do the recitation of the mantra like we did last time. So I'm going to put that up on the screen. And we visualize ourselves. Whoops. 1 second. Okay. So if you remember, we came to Manjushri. Om, the Lord of Speech, Mum. Om Wagishvari Mum. So if you will sit in the meditation position, the classic meditation position, we call this the 7-point posture of the Buddha Varanchana. So we're sitting on a cushion, either on the floor or on a chair, and we're trying to get comfortable where we are sitting on our sit bones, which is the lower part of our pelvis in our butt. And we're trying to rest the weight of our body on those sit bones and not on the fleshy part of our butt or our thighs, where when we sit and when we crush our thighs or our butt like that, our leg might tend to fall asleep because we're impeding the flow of blood around, so it falls asleep. So we need to find those sit bones. If you've ever been to a yoga session, you might have learned about that. So here's a practical application for sitting on those sit bones. And then our legs are either flat on the floor or they're crossed in front of us. Our hands are, our left hand is up, our right hand is lying in our left hand, and our thumbs are touching 4 inches below our navel. And our back is straight. And we pull our shoulders back, but not up. We just relax our shoulders, but pull them back and gives us a very elegant position. And it just pulls our 2 hands into our abdomen. And so our hands are in this classic meditation position. And then our head is resting on our neck, and our chin is slightly down. So our gaze is down through the direction of our nose, looking down about 3 or 4 or 5 feet out in front of us, but just not looking at anything as a stare, just looking as a gaze. Or we can close our eyes, but it's just relaxed. We're not trying to look at anything. And our mouth is open or closed. Our tongue is on the roof of the mouth behind our front teeth. If we're breathing, we breathe in through our nostrils, both nostrils, bringing the breath all the way down to our abdomen, to our navel. And then we exhale through the 2 passageways through our nose or through our mouth. And to keep our mouth from drying out, our tongue is on the roof of our mouth behind our front teeth. and keeps our mouth moist. So this is the 7-point posture of the Buddha Varanchana. So we sit in this position and we visualize ourselves sitting in the lotus position. This is the lotus position. We are the lotus, we are arising from the defilement of the ocean of samsara. The lotus that comes from that defilement at the bottom of the ocean of suffering. So we are sitting in nirvana as we sit in this position, and we are the speech of this purity, the speech of this pure nature, of this Manjushri. So we recite this mantra, keeping this visualization in our heart center, that this is in our heart center. We become this deity. Om Vagishvari Mam, 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 Om Vagishvari Mam. Om Vagishvari Mam, 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 Om Vagishvari Mam. Om Vagishvari Mam, 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 Om Vagishvari Mam. Om Vagishvari Mam, 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 Om Vagishvari Mam. Om Vagishvari Mam, 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 Om Vagishvari Mam. Om Vagishvari Mam, 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 Om Vagishvari Mam. Om Vagishvari Mam, 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 Om Vagishvari Mam. Om Vagishvari Mam, 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 Om Vagishvari Mam. Om Vagishvari Mam, 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 Om Wagishvari Mum. 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 Like bees buzzing around a beehive. Om Wagishvari Mum. 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 Go as quickly as you can, but if you can't go real fast, just do it as quickly as you can, but just visualize, recite each syllable distinctly. Om Wagishvari Mum. 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 And visualize that our voices are all coming together as one voice, one vibration, and that throughout the world there are hundreds of thousands of people right now who are reciting this mantra or mantras just like this, and that all vibrating, we are all vibrating together in harmonious speech, vibrating together this Om Wagishvari Mum. I am the Lord of speech. Om Wagishvari Mum. Om Wagishvari Mum. Om Wagishvari Mum. We are spiritually all interconnected. Om Wagishvari Mum. 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 So now we perform the dissolution. Follow these instructions. It says, the outer universe dissolves into light, which is absorbed into myself. I then dissolve into the mum syllable, harmonious speech, which dissolves from the bottom to the top, to the nada, to the flame at the top of the mum syllable, and gradually becoming emptiness. I meditate in the bliss of non-duality of subject and object. So we go back, and the mum syllable here is in the lower right-hand side. We see this mum syllable, and above this circle at the top is a flame, a single flame that is burning, and that are the light from all these beings all dissolves into the mum syllable at our heart center, and the mum syllable dissolves into that flame, into the emptiness, into the meditation mind. So just rest and visualize that light all coming together. You can use the golden light of Manjushri, that all beings dissolve into the golden light of Manjushri, dissolving into the mum syllable, and then dissolving into space. Do a short meditation. Take a deep breath through both nostrils. Bring the breath all the way down to your navel. Hold the breath. Exhale through both nostrils, squeezing out all that stale, negative, dark air, and hold the breath. Breathe in again, both nostrils. Hold it. Exhale. One last time, breathe in. Exhale. Open your eyes. Now we come to the dedication prayer. We recite this together. By the light of your wisdom, compassionate one, may the darkness of ignorance in my mind be dispelled. To realize all the sutras and commentaries, please grant me the power of radiant wisdom. Whenever I want to see you or want you to clarify my confusion, Lord Manjushri Goka, may I have a clear vision of you without hindrance. You, Manjushri, have performed great deeds to the fullest limit of the 10 directions for the benefit of all sentient beings. May I and others perform the same activities. So that completes this practice for tonight. Any comments or questions?
Lance, I really wanted to thank you for integrating the conceptual with the application. This is really, since I've been with you now for a couple cycles of this, I love this format. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. Well, I hope you're enjoying this, and next week we'll continue where we'll see how the how this manifests, the 5 poisons and the antidotes manifest as the 6 human realms. So in order to do that, we need to understand karma, cause, and effect. So we'll be talking about karma, cause, and effect. And we can talk about external conditions such as astrological phenomena, along with anything else that comes into your mind. Does anybody have anything? Okay, well then we need to do our last dedication. So if you don't mind, this is what we will do here. Whoops. Just a moment. Okay. So now our last dedication prayer is this prayer here. Okay. This is the dedication prayer by Lord Jigden Sumgun. And Lord Jigden Sumgun is the founder of our lineage, of this lineage. He lived 800 years ago. This lineage began 800 years ago and is unbroken for 800 years. So we recite this together out loud. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis, dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana, and the innate word of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mothers sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Mars and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om Ahom. Just a moment. So now, Om. This is the body of the Buddha. Ah, the speech of the Buddha. Hum, the mind of the Buddha. Here we go. Om, ah, hum. Om, ah, hum. Om, ah, hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you all very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Anybody has any
Thank
questions?
you, Lance. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Thank you very much.